Welcome. This is a talk prepared for BABA, the British Association of Vedic Astrology. It's an exploration of the meaning of the Jyotirlinga, which is a sacred temple, part of a whole spiral of sacred temples in India, and how they send their energy into your horoscope and how they make your yogas manifest. So, as ever, my inspiration is coming thanks to the teachings of my spiritual guide, Sri Singh Sahib Yogi Bhajan, and my Jyotish mentor, Pandit Sanjay Rath, who bring the energies of the golden chain for us to learn from. I'm going to start, instead of a prayer, I'm going to read a short shloka from Siddhi Guru Granth Sahib, which was chosen for this talk. Shlok Mardana. He himself is the angelic being, the heavenly herald, and the celestial singer. He himself is the one who explains the 6 schools of philosophy. He himself is Shiva, Shankara, and Mahesh. He himself is the Gurmukh, who speaks the unspoken speech. He himself is the yogi. He himself is the sensual enjoyer. He himself is the sannyasi wandering through the wilderness. He discusses with himself and he teaches himself. He himself is discreet, graceful, and wise. Staging his own play, he himself watches it. He himself is the knower of all beings. We'll talk about the 12 Jyotirlinga temples. They are sites sacred to Lord Shiva, scattered in an apparently random, but actually not random pattern throughout India. They form a golden spiral, starting in the center with Krishneshwara temple and spiraling around and finally ending at Kedarnath in the Himalayas. These ancient sacred sites are vortexes or vortices, and so Shiva's light, his radiance of consciousness, has come into each one of these. And they're laid out in this pattern of the golden ratio, also known as the Fibonacci spiral, which was first described by Rishi Pingala. And, like every country, every ancient civilization has its sacred sites that have geocosmic heightened energy. And so these 12 Jyotirlingas are full of heightened energy. And now when it comes to the individual horoscope, we can actually find their footprint in each horoscope as a unique presence. We'll talk about that, how to find your Jyotirlinga Rashi, your sign that has that energy of the Shiva consciousness. And we'll talk about how the grahas are controlled at higher levels by higher devatas. The graha itself as a presence is considered a living presence and is a devata for the body. So in the Rashi level of the chart, the grahas are devatas. Each one has an Adi Devata, which is a higher level, which activates at mental level. And we see this in the Navamsha, the D9. And finally, the highest level is Pratyadi Devata, and that is telling about the soul. And this is in the Shastiyamsha, the D60 divisional chart. So today we're just going to talk about Surya, though each of the grahas has its own set of devatas, but we'll just focus on Surya. And Surya, as a graha, has, even just at the body level, has 12 forms, which are the 12 Adityas, who represent the 12 months of the year. So as Surya moves from sign to sign through the year, each of these signs wakes up these adityas and manifests all the wealth, all the good things in each sign. The Adi Devata we'll see in the Navamsha, and since for Surya it's Agni, seeing the strength of fire, especially in the Navamsha, shows a very strong mind. It shows us how to empower the mind, because it means when there are planets in fire signs that Surya is very happy and very active, the sun. And so, for example, Albert Einstein has 5 planets in Navamsha that are in fire signs and 2 more in the fire houses. And the math genius Ramanujan has 4 planets in fire signs and 3 in fire houses. Then at the Pratyadi Devata level in the D60, we can see what is the soul command? What is the outcomes that are already pre-written for the soul to learn? Since Lord Shiva is the controller of Surya Dev, and Lord Shiva is pouring this energy into the 12 Jyotirlinga sacred temples. So when we find the Jyotirlinga Rashi in the chart, we will know the vortex for Shiva energy in our chart. So how do we find it? We have to approach Shiva, who is beyond comprehension, beyond any form at all. We find him through Shakti. So the polarity of consciousness is energy. The polarity of silence is sound. The polarity of power is meaning. So all of this, we have oneness versus duality. And this is really at the root of understanding our horoscope, to know what shows the oneness and what shows the duality. To really see this duality working, which forms our personal ego, we will look at a point called the Aruda Lagna. The Aruda is the image. So, in the first year of life, in the Naisargika dashas, the moon is governing our consciousness. So an infant being under the moon is completely in an ocean of consciousness with no separation between self and other, no ego, no separation of body and mind. That comes to develop during and by the end of the first year, when the Naisargika dashas shift from moon to Mars. Then an ego has formed. And then once in the terrible twos, the infant knows there's my body and there's everything outside my body. There's my will and there's the will of things outside me. So the ego is on its way, and that personal ego has to develop all throughout life to become stronger and stronger until ultimately we can transcend it. So as the ego forms, we see that in the horoscope. The Aruda Lagna shows the personal ego. So the Aruda Lagna is a point found by projection. It's a mirror image. We take the Lagna point, and it has a ruler, and we count the houses from the Lagna to its ruler, and then count the same number of houses to the Aruda, the image house. So there's Arudas for every planet, there's Arudas for many things in the chart, but we're just going to focus on the Aruda for the Lagna itself, which is called the AL Aruda Lagna. So this creation of an Aruda is like creating duality out of the oneness of consciousness. The moon splits up our personal cosmos into these reflected images or Arudas. So our own personal hall of mirrors comes into manifestation, and this becomes the story of our life. This is the illusions that we live by. This is what we project. This is what we believe. And this is how others see us. This AL you can find in your chart, again, just by counting from the Lagna to the Lord, and then the same number of houses to the AL. But there are some exceptions. for reasons we can go into elsewhere, which is if the Lugna Lord is in a Kendra from the Lugna, then the AL will be found in these places of exception. So if your Lugna Lord is in 1 or 7, the Aruda will be in the 10th. If your Lugna Lord is 4 or 10, your Aruda will be in the 4th. So we're going to look for an example. We'll use the chart of Simone Biles, the spectacular, fantastic Olympic gymnast who has, shattered all kinds of records, who has all kinds of new moves in gymnastics are named for Biles because she's done things no one has ever done before. So let's try to study her horoscope and understand what shows this talent. She has Aquarius rising, and the Lord is Saturn. So we count 1, 2 from the Lugna to count inclusively always from the first house to the second house. Then we have to find the Aruda Lugna. So we count the same number inclusively, 1, 2. And there we find the Aruda Lugna in the sign of Aries in the 3rd house. So Aries is the focus of her personal ego. Aries is the sign of energy, athletics, elite performance, and it's in the 3rd house, which is called the house of parikrama, extra effort, fantastic energy. So it makes total sense that her Aruda would be in Aries. Now, our next step is to find the Jyotirlinga Rashi, this temple in the horoscope. From any Lugna, the trines to it are the paths for Dharma, because basically from the sun, the trines are where its rays of power go. So if we're considering a Lugna, we want to know the trines to find the duty. So from the point of view of the AL, the personal ego, the 5th and the 9th, and the 1st also as a trine, are where its finest, noblest instincts emerge. This is what I have to do, is what the AL says. Then we also bring in the moon, because moon is the factor, moon is the psyche, moon is the factor of deep emotion. Moon, from that oneness, is creating that hall of mirrors. So moon is the overlord of the images, the Arudas. From moon, the Kendras are the tides of deep emotion that force us into action like waves. So the 1st and 7th from the moon especially have high emotion, surges of feeling. The first from the moon is all about self-love. When at an extreme, it can be narcissism. But it's about focusing and developing oneself. And the 7th is other-directed passion for something outside herself. And the 4th and 10th from the moon are the low tides. So this can go into depression in the 4th house, which is considered a weak place, or rise to calm and equanimity in the 10th from the moon, which is a beautiful place. Positive planets there give a special yoga called Amala Yoga, making somebody have a beautiful reputation and play some kind of great role for society. Now, we put these 2 factors together to find the Jyotirlinga. So we'll look at the trines from the Lugna, the AL, trines from the AL, and Kendras from the moon. And always only one house will be common to both. And this identifies the Jyotirlinga Rashi. For Simone Biles, we'll take the 2 steps separately. So first we're looking at trines from her AL. Her AL is in Aries and in the fire sign. So the other 2 fire signs will be the trines, Leo and Sagittarius. These are the 3 trines. And so fire and energy is her duty. And the houses are also significant. These are houses from the ascendant that are the natural, or from from the ascendant, that are natural air houses. 3, 7, and 11 houses are about the air element. So moving and flying with huge energy. That's what she does. Now we look at the next step is we take the 4 kendras from moon. The moon kendras are in the fixed signs. So they're about stability and grounding. The moon is in Taurus, the most earthy sign, wanting to build up from the ground. And it's also in kendras to the lagna. So it's very much about being rooted and grounded. So to fly through the air, she then has to land and stick the landing and become totally stable when she lands. So we see that these houses completely support that part of the process. Putting the two together, what do we get? We get the one that is trine to the AL and the one that is in Kendra to moon. It is Leo. Leo is 4th from the moon, therefore about the grounding and steadying herself and coming into herself. And Leo is about this powerful solar energy. So this is, for her, the Jyotirlinga Rashi. And it's well placed. We can also, once we know our Jyotirlinga Rashi, it's good to see what house is it in from the ascendant. So when it's in a Kendra from the regular Lagna, this is a good sign that the soul purpose will start manifesting early in life. You will wake up early to what you're meant to do in life. So for Simone, we can see this happen because if we count, we use the Sudarshan chakra reckoning and we count from the ascendant takes 12 years in Sudarshan chakra dasha. And each house gets one of those years. So the first house is Aquarius, the second, up to age 1, up to age 2 is Pisces. And there's a lot of planets there. So in her even in her second year, she was going through some turmoil because her family, she was born to a family that was plagued with drug addiction. Her father was gone, her mother was not able to take care of her, and she was put in foster care. And then up to 4, when she was between 3 and 4, her grandfather adopted her, found her in foster care, and brought her to live with him. And so the moon came in and stabilized her life. And then up to 5, up to 6, and between 6 and 7, she came to the Jyotirlinga Rashi. And what happened that year? That's when she discovered gymnastics. She was on a field trip with her school, and she saw people doing gymnastics, and that woke her up to what she wanted to do. So let's look at this sign. So Leo is her Jyotirlinga. So the Jyotirlingas are laid out in this sacred spiral map around, they go, spiraling around through the subcontinent. Rameshwara is at the very southern tip, and Kedarnath is at the very north. They are aligned with the Rashis of the chart, and not exactly following that spiral pattern chronologically, but instead they have their own association with each of these signs of the horoscope. So for Leo, for Simone Biles, hers is in Leo, and Leo connects to Vaidyanath. Vaidyanath is the Jyotirlinga over here, sometimes also called Vaidyanath. And this is the one that is infusing her chart with its energy. Now, for all of these Jyotirlingas, we see also they follow the map of solar irradiation. The hottest cities through India are the pattern of solar radiation follows this spiraling pattern of the Jyotirlingas. So the Jyotirlingas are correlates of this energy of maximum solar radiation, which is most intense in these cities to the west, and then is the least in the far extremes of the south and the north. So we see this connection. And also the Jyotirlinga site, they straddle this line of the orbit of maximum solar energy. There's a line going around the Earth that when a satellite travels on it, there's one line where the energies of day and night are not bifurcated. There's one line where a satellite can get maximum solar energy, and that line bisects this spiral of the Jyotirlingas. So as we mentioned, Prajur is teaching that yogas have to be sparked into action by Surya. So in a chart for your best yogas to manifest, even if sun does not seem to be helping or being prominent, that role can be taken over by the Jyotirlinga Rashi. Now, for this chart that we're studying, Vaidyanatha is the Jyotirlinga, and the story of it is that it has huge vitality and healing abilities. Shiva was as the divine physician, had his Ravana as his disciple, who, because of his tapas, his sadhana, was gaining heads, like with all the knowledge. He gained up to 10 heads, and as each one fell away or needed renewing, Shiva could renew that for him. Eventually, Ravana overdid it, and he fell away. He fell off the wagon in pride. But this energy of renewal, of healing, of strength, giving someone 9 lives like a cat, is in this Leo sign, the Vaidyanath Jyotirlinga. So this is what's empowering the chart of Simone Biles. Now we can study the Jyotirlinga Rashi a little bit more as almost like its own lagna in the chart, and then we see yogas that relate to it. So if we look at the Leo sign, opposite Leo sign, we have an Adi Yoga where we have 3 planets in this beautiful triangular relationship, where we have the 12th, 1st, and 2nd houses all occupied, and these are like creating this formation from the Jyotirlinga Rashi that's called an Adi Yoga. And then this is even more emphasized because these planets have an exchange going on. Saturn is ruling the sign of Jupiter, and Jupiter is ruling the sign of Saturn. So that's a mutual exchange, or parivartana. And also, even the house karakas are exchanging, because Saturn is the house karaka for 12th house and Jupiter for 2nd. So there's this huge interchange and this flexibility. They're going back and forth. Then we also look at the sun as the Lord of Leo. When there's no planet in the Jyotirlinga, the Lord is controlling and directing it. So this sun is at 0 degrees, which is a special movement of the sun just entering a new Rashi. So a new Aditya is waking up. And so this is also very extraordinary, and the Aditya will be very important. And finally, from the regular lagna, having planets in 12, 1, and 2 is called Indra Yoga, and it gives you the ability to master the senses. So both the Jyotirlinga, giving this vitality, and this Indra Yoga, giving power of mastery over the senses, makes her able to control her body. Now, if we look in the D9, the Navamsha, we said that is at the mental level. So there we look at the same sign, Leo, and we see that K2 is there. K2 in Leo, K2 is exalted in that sign. And so it's very high fire, very great inspiration, very strong mental focus to be able to do the extraordinary things she does. And K2 actually rules flying through the air. So it's perfect. Now we'll look at the Aditya for Leo. So, as these are the forms of the sun gods for each Rashi in the chart. And the Adityas wake up as the sun moves through each sign through the 12 months of the year. And Surya is considered to have a whole entourage going with him. So these signs are also correlated to the signs of the horoscope. And the Aditya for Leo sign is Indra. So again, this focus on Indra, the head of the gods, the one who has powerful senses and sensory control. As an Aditya form specifically, he's called Chakra, the mighty. He has great vitality, and his weapon is the lightning bolt. So again, he's overlord of the senses. This supports the healing gifts of the Vaidyanat. So now we'll go to the soul level, because we said, okay, we can see these physical gifts in the Rashi chart. We can see the mental gifts in the Navamsha. And now we want to see the soul mandate in the D60, Shastiyamsha. So let's look at that and see any planet in the sign of Leo or the Lord to understand the higher purpose of the whole life and put that together with the energy of the Aditya. In Simone's, this is her Shastiyamsha D60 chart. And so we see Leo has a planet, and the planet is Mercury. And guess what? Mercury is the karaka or significator for gymnastics, hatha yoga, movement, and also sports and competition. So it says that's her mandate, to be a gymnast. And then we look at the Lord, which is Sun, and Sun, just like in the Rashi chart, Sun is in Pisces. So we know the Aditya of Pisces will be very important to tell her story. So the Aditya for this 12th sign is Vishnu. And as an Aditya, the form is called Vamana, the story. So Vishnu, Aditya. Vishnu is the last and best as an Aditya of the sons of Rishi Kashyap and goddess Aditi. Vishnu means the one who is unbeatable. And the story about him, he's in the Vishnu form. And the story is that he was like this little boy who seemed like he was so small, he was a dwarf. And he visited this mighty king, and they engaged in a debate, and they had a confrontation. And actually, Vamana, or Vishnu, beat the king in the debate. And so the king said, all right, you have won. So I will give you land. I will give you as much land as you can cover with 3 steps of your feet. Because the king was a bit snarky, and he thought, oh, this little dwarf is not going to cover much ground. And so Vishnu woke up, and he became Tri Vikrama, the god, and he took 3 steps and covered the 3 lokas. So he conquered huge territory. So this story is, very applicable to the life of Simone Biles, right? She's got, her height is 4 feet 8 inches. She was this, this almost abandoned child living in foster care. She had attention deficit disorder. And then her grandfather helped her, and she got into school, and then she started gymnastics. And now she's the world famous GOAT, greatest of all time in her sport. World famous, going on tour. So it's a beautiful outpicturing of this story of Vishnu and Vamana. So now we'll just go through a couple more examples that relate to the issue of the moment, which is the US election coming up in just, less than a month. So we'll look at the charts of the candidates, and we'll look at the chart of the United States. So we'll start with the chart of Donald Trump. When we do the Jyotirlinga process, we find that the trine to Aruda Lagna 1, 5, or 9, that is also a Kendra to Moon, one of the 4 angles for Moon, is where Moon itself is. It is the AL, and it is the Moon. the sign is Scorpio. And the Jyotirlinga associated with Scorpio is Grishneshwar. So Grishneshwara Jyotirlinga is very interesting. It's at the very center of the spiral, and it has a legend involving sibling jealousy. One sister was infertile, and so she asked her sister to have a child with the first sister's husband. Later, in anger and envy, she killed the sister's child. And then the mother of the son prayed. She was a devotee of Shiva. She prayed, and her son came back to her, came back to life. And the mother further prayed that her sister be forgiven. And Shiva was pleased and created this Jyotirlinga radiance in this temple. And another story is about a holy lake nearby called Shiva Lake. Parvati took vermilion and saffron she was going to put in the partings of her hair and mix them with the water from this lake. And the vermilion turned into a Shiva Linga with a radiant light. And so she used friction from her thumb. And that's why it's called Grishneshwara, which means Grishnesh means friction, and from the thumb. And the thumb is the Mars finger among, the planet Mars its energy is going into the thumb, which is the one opposed to the others, in which when you become a 2-year-old, your ego forms and the thumb separates you, self versus other, body versus mind. And so little children are sucking their thumbs as they're creating a personal ego. So we see, looking at the chart of Trump, when planets occupy the Jyotirlinga Rashi, they're also termed as Jata Grahas, planets in this Jyotirlinga sign. Jata means the planets bringing you to birth. So for Trump, we see the moon is in the first from the Jyotirlinga is in the first from the moon, which we said earlier, that's about self-focus, strong. It can even be narcissistic. And the Aruda Lagna, it's in the first from the Aruda Lagna, which intensifies this. And the planet Ketu is there also. So moon Ketu creates a kind of extremist, and he can attract passionate following. And he creates a wedge against the opposition because Ketu splits everything in half and is creating a big wall. And the Lord is Mars, which also represents walls. Mars is in the 10th from the moon, so it should be an Amala yoga for a powerful reputation. But when a malefic is there instead of a benefic, it's a reputation that is, a reputation for Mars qualities, of which can be bullying, which can be hatred. And the having a malefic in the Lagna is called Ashubha yoga. So it can bring destruction because it's somebody whose actions can create rancor and division. Now, when we look into the Navamsha chart, we see the Scorpio. So, we always take the Jyotirlinga, same sign, see it in the Navamsha chart, and look at the rulers to understand how it's acting. So Scorpio has 2 lords. One is Ketu, which is again with the moon. So intense emotion. Moon Ketu people are hypersensitive and quick to take offense. And then the other lord is Mars, which is in the 7th from the Jyotirlinga Rashi. And Mars in the 7th from anything is very frustrated and angry. And so this Mars in the Lagna, again in Navamsha, shows somebody who resorts to force at the first sign of offense. Strong arm tactics is his go-to method. Now, when we look at the Aditya for Scorpio, the 8th sign, Scorpio, has the god Parjanya as his energy there. So we're going to look at Parjanya as the Aditya, and he is the god of rain and thunder. So Parjanya is the one who fertilizes the earth. And Scorpio in the body is the innermost organs, the gonads, where the spark of life is to create new life. These gonads are the most hidden origins within the body. And just as Krishneshwara temple is at the center of the spiral, this like hidden energy at the center. And so it shows how there's the power in this sign of Scorpio to stir up the pre-rational level of consciousness, to stir up intense emotions. And this will be translated over to anyone who comes under the influence of him as a leader and follower. Now, let's look at the chart of USA. So, because I think in election, it's always helpful to see how the candidates match up with the nation. So the chart I like to use for the USA, everyone has their own favorite USA chart, because everyone agrees that the birthday is July 4th, 1776, but nobody agrees as to what is the exact time of day to give the rising sign. So I like 2:00 in the afternoon because that was noted as the time when the Congress came out and sent people out to inform the public out in the public square. They rang the Liberty Bell and the crowds cheered and everyone was in jubilation. And then the whole process of signing it went on until the late evening. So some people like to use the evening, but that doesn't make sense to me because the signing took more days to complete. So I like this afternoon chart. And so if we look at this with Libra rising, then we have this whole stellium of planets in Gemini in the ninth house. The ninth house is the world stage. So with such a huge emphasis of Gemini in the ninth house, we see why people often refer to the US as a Gemini country. And we see that it's destined to have big influence on the world stage. And then when we do the Jyotirlinga, we look at the Aruda Lagna, which is in Libra, because again, just to recap, how do we do Aruda Lagna? We start from Lagna, we count to the Lord, which is Venus in the ninth, and then we count 9 again to find AL, and AL is therefore in the fifth house, and the sign is Aquarius. And we do have the moon there. So Kedarnath is the Jyotirlinga. Kedarnath is in the Himalayas. It's like the final reaches of the spiral. It's reaching that highest point. And the story connected with Lord Shiva's energy there is that the Pandavas, after the war, were seeking forgiveness for acts they had done during the war. And they were pursuing Shiva to try to tie him down and demand him to forgive them. And he kept eluding them and racing away from them and going higher and higher. And then finally, he disappeared underground at Kedarnath. And his radiance went into the temple there. And so this is like the final step in the quest for forgiveness is in this house. So Aquarius is a very high Jyotirlinga. And in the Navamsha, the USA has Jupiter in the Navamsha, Jupiter rising. So this shows, promises a great destiny, that whatever event started that day is going to have a great future and great expansion, great intelligence. However, we also have to consider the planet in the Aquarius sign, which is Moon, the Jata Graha. Moon is, since there's a planet there, that planet is very important in bringing the event to manifestation or the person. This moon is in Aquarius, and Aquarius is ruled by Rahu as well as Saturn. Rahu is in the sign of the moon, Cancer, and moon is in the sign of Rahu. So this is an exchange of signs, and it strongly links the moon to the Rahu. Okay, so also we should note that the moon is in the first from the Aruda Lagna. So again, there's this very strong focus on self and self-development and and personal enterprise and personal freedom. And, this Liberty Bell was being rung at this moment in Philadelphia. So we have this high tide and surging feelings about the self and freedom. And the moon, being the 10th lord in the 5th house, is giving a Raj Yoga in the chart. The Aditya for Aquarius is Twashtra, who is the god of the celestial. He's the celestial architect, and he's full of ingenious, inventive ability. He uses the power of positive thinking, but he's always has to battle Indra to protect Soma, the life-giving force. And at some point, Indra even kills Twashtra's son. So there's a lot of conflict there. But again, this Jupiter is very positive in the Navamsha being there, and it promotes intelligence. But at the same time, the moon being this Jatagraha, when we see it in the Navamsha, we see it as foreboding. I mean, remember, the Congress was realizing it was going to have to go to war to fight for its right to be born. And this moon is debilitated in Scorpio. So debilitated planets bring out the darkest side. And not only is it debilitated, but it's flanked by 2 malefic planets, Mars and Rahu. And Rahu is very weak. So we see the dark side of the coin here, fear, and everything that can go wrong in the American psyche. So normally, when a graha being in Jyotirlinga Rashi, we see everything about the purpose of being in the psyche from that planet. So we're going to focus a lot on the moon in all 3 divisional charts. This exchange of moon and Rahu has to do with ethnic melting, the melting pot, of many nationalities coming together, the different colonies, and also the whole factor of running over the indigenous native population, and then the issues that coming up about slavery and all the issues of immigration and migrations, waves and waves of migration that have characterized American history and American identity. That's all shown by this moon Rahu exchange. And the weakness of the moon in the Navamsha shows the rolling over and destruction of the native populations and things like slavery. So it's all contained there in these charts. Then we have the D60, and there we have a very beautiful Aquarius again with Sun and Mercury in Aquarius. And Mercury, we can consider the Atmakaraka, but I'll talk about that in another presentation. But just having Sun Mercury in the ascendant is very fortunate. I mean, even like the chart of President Abraham Lincoln has Aquarius with Sun Mercury in the Lagna. So we'll see that, all presidents will have some links to this chart of the nation. But, it's again fascinating to see how in this D60, which is the soul mandate, which puts Aquarius in the 1st house, saying the mandate is leadership. Again, the moon is in the same weakness. It's in Scorpio, but at least the planets flanking it are not as negative in the D60 because Ketu is in a beneficial sign, and Jupiter is a great benefic, and Ketu is in a great house, the 9th house. So there's a lot of spiritual potential there if the moon can resurrect itself. So now we'll compare the candidate charts to the nation chart now that we looked at it a little bit. Now, starting with the D9, remember Navamsha, this is about the Adi Devata for moon is Jala as a god, as a Devata, the water. The water element is the mental level of moon. So it's about emotion and sentiment. So we can get the sentiment and the emotion of a nation by looking at its Navamsha chart. That is, if the moon is the Jata Graha, like for USA. Now, looking at Donald Trump together with the USA, we see a complete syncing up and matching up of his Jyotirlinga Rashi of Scorpio containing Moon and Ketu, and this extremely self-centered combo of Moon, Aruda, and Ketu all in the fourth house of emotion. This maps right over to the USA Navamsha Moon in Scorpio. So we can say that Donald Trump, with his Jatagrahas mapping right onto the USA Jatagraha in the Navamsha, profoundly wakes up the emotion of the American psyche. He stirs people's passions. He stirs up huge, irrational waves of emotion in which truth and logic and reason become extremely secondary to the presence of feeling, deep, deep feeling. So we see, Trump's increasingly irrational and hate-mongering and crazy rantings about migrants, and, that's his main issue, but many other issues where he definitely goes beyond the bounds of rationality and seems to be getting worse and worse. This is the mapping of this powerful Scorpio into the USA Scorpio. So he finds millions of receptive minds and psyches who are awakened and inspired by this like pre-rational spark of life that they see in him. So this Moon Ketu activates the whole Scorpio side of the USA psyche, and all the echoes of the negative things of the US past, of slavery and of, killing native populations and all of this. It's all just soup for the meal for Trump's psyche. And so we see this. The moon is in Papa Kartri. So the victim mentality, the xenophobia, and this incessant repetition of these themes strikes a huge chord with, that half of the American populace that is wedged apart because of this Ketu Rahu wall. So now we'll look at the chart for Kamala Harris and see, is this any kind of an antidote to this? Is there power in this chart? So we'll talk a little bit about this chart. And we see that there's a recorded birth time for her available online. And so her rising sign is Gemini with exalted Rahu in Gemini, exactly on the ascendant. So when an exalted planet is on the ascendant, the person becomes like an icon or an avatar of some kind of energy. And Rahu is fantastic for the field of politics. So then when we do the Jyotirlinga, when we look at we go from the ascendant to find the AL, we count from the Lagna, Gemini, to Mercury, the Lord, is 5 houses. Then we count 5 again, and we come to the 9th house. So this is the Aruda, AL. And here we have a planet. We have Saturn. And Saturn is in its own sign, which is a good thing. And we have to look at the trine from the Aruda that is also one of the kendras from the moon. So the moon is over here in Aries, and the kendra to the moon, that is one of the 3 air house trines, is Libra. So her Jyotirlinga Rashi, the sacred temple in her horoscope, is in the sign of Libra. The temple there is called Mahakaleshwar Jyotirlinga. And there's 2 planets in there to play the role of the Jatagrahas. This is Sun and Mercury, and they are in an exchange because Sun rules Leo and Venus rules Libra. So they have a linkage, very strong linkage, and they change signs with each other, strengthening each other. It's very good to have an exchange between the third house from the regular lagna and the fifth house from the very regular lagna, because this is a yoga for early manifestation of Raj Yoga in your life. So if a chart has Raj Yogas, they will start to appear early on in life when the third houses and fifth houses are part of it. And we'll see more about her pattern of Raj Yogas. But then also let's quickly look at the Navamsha. So the Jatagrahas then will be not just Sun and Mercury. Instead, we can say Sun and Venus, because Mercury is combust. It's very close to the Sun. So we'll just take the Sun and the Venus as they are linked. So we want to see Sun and Venus as the Jatagrahas, and we see Sun and Venus are together in the Navamsha chart along with Saturn. And Sun and Venus are part of a full moon pattern. Her moon is in Taurus. So this is a very powerful pattern going from Scorpio to Taurus as the Jatagrahas, while the Jyotirlinga Rashi of Libra has Rahu in it, which we saw was very strong in the main chart, Rashi chart. So this is a strong chart with the Jyotirlinga in the Rashi and the Navamsha. And now we'll see more about the strengths of the chart. But first, let's mention about this particular Jyotirlinga Mahakaleshwar. So this is for the sign of Libra, and it's facing south. It's the only one where the deity is facing south, which when a temple faces to the south, it means the sun is coming into its strongest direction of the 10th house. So its weakness in the sign of Libra gets overcome by having the temple being south-facing. The story of the war on an ancient city also explains why the sign of Libra is sometimes associated with warfare in leaders, like in the chart of Hitler, in the chart of Gandhi. Libra is very important and shows protecting rights of victims of social injustice. If it's well disposited, in the case of Hitler, it's the opposite, extreme opposite. But Libra has to do with, it can be very much about conflict and overcoming. So Kamala Harris has this sun in Libra. That is the Jyotirlinga Rashi. So it's very good for a statesman, for a leader, to have planets in Libra, because then they can understand warfare versus diplomacy and social justice, etc., issues like that. So now we'll take a moment to just look at these Maharaja yogas in the chart and why this chart is so powerful to bring somebody from, an obscure beginning, unlikely beginning, that a woman of color, would rise up to such huge worldwide prominence and the possibility of becoming leader of the most powerful country in the world. So what are the Raj Yogas in the chart? For somebody to become a head of state, you have to have Maharaja Yogas. Maharaja Yogas are not just ordinary Raja Yogas, but they have to do with combinations of the first house and the fifth house, because from any lagna, because the first house is the natural sign of Aries, leadership, and the fifth house is the sign of Leo, kingly power, executive, royal, holding the royal throne. So we see that there are not just one, but 3 or 4 Maharaja yogas in this chart. So let's check what those are. First of all, if we start from the Aruda Lagna, which we saw is in Aquarius, and the 9th house is the world stage, we have a planet there in its own sign, which is good. Planets in their own sign are considered to be full of the energy of the tattva. They rule. So Saturn rules air tattva, vayu tattva, movement. So it's like the unmoved mover. Without doing anything, it causes things to move all around it. And so with these high energy planets in their own sign, we see how they act in the more physical level of the chart through the planet that rules the exaltation sign. So for Aquarius, this is Venus, which rules the exaltation of Saturn in Libra. But anyway, now to the Maharaja part, which is from the AL, we want to see the fifth. Is there a link between the first and the fifth from AL? Yes, indeed, because Aquarius has two lords. One is Saturn and one is Rahu. So Rahu is in the fifth from the AL, which is Maharaja Yoga. And there it is. And it's sitting in the regular Lagna exalted. So that's super Maharaja Yoga. Then if we go from the ascendant, we want to see the fifth there. Is there a link between 1 and 5 from ascendant? Yes, indeed, because the ascendant lord is Mercury in the fifth from the ascendant. And it's there with the planet that rules kings, the sun. And the sun is further strengthened because it has this exchange with Sun and Venus. So then we look at the moon, which is another Lagna, and is there a connection between the moon and the fifth from it? Yes, the fifth from the moon has this Venus. So the moon is a full moon, and in the fifth from it is Venus, which is part of this Raj Yoga from the Lagna. So everything is connected in great Maharaja Yogas. That's why this chart is so strong. Okay, now, if we go ahead and try to map this onto the USA chart, we find very interesting things. Because Harris's Jyotirlinga Rashi is Libra with the Sun and Mercury. And how does that connect to the nation? Well, the USA ascendant is Libra. And if we looked at Harris's Aruda Lagna, it's Aquarius. And that maps over to the USA Jyotirlinga Rashi in the fifth house. And finally, if we look at the ascendant itself, Gemini, with the exalted Rahu, and map that to US, it ends up in this huge stellium in the ninth house of the world stage. So, and that is the ascendant lord for USA chart. If it has Libra rising, the ruler is Venus in the ninth. So Kamala Harris has Rahu connecting to all of that, meaning that she can magnify that and be part of that and work with that energy. So then also checking the Navamsha, we see that Libra in Navamsha, in her chart, it's the Jyotirlinga Rashi, it's her rising sign, meaning leadership is her motion goes towards leadership. And, this connects to the USA ninth house of Navamsha, which is a fortunate place, and Mars is there. But then it's really interesting when we see the Jata Grahas. So remember we said Sun, Venus are her Jata Grahas because of the exchange. And that's Saturn, Sun, and Venus in Scorpio maps on to the USA moon in Scorpio. And it's a full moon. So her moon is kind of like a counteraction to the debilitated moon of the US. So it's like her role is to come in here and elevate this very depressed situation that we find ourselves in. The Saturn, Sun, and Venus are strong enough to, overcome and fight this negativity of this very depressed moon. And her full moon is like substituting upliftment, joy, and happiness. So that is the theme. And, so hopefully that is what we are coming to as an outcome of this election in a few short weeks. So remembering that Surya holds lotus flowers. So we hope that, Lotus, Kamala, can have some success to help the whole country overcome the negativity and the division that exists right now. Let's just check one last thing, which is the Sudarshan Chakra Dasha, the timing of the years. to see for each candidate what timing are they in. So for Trump, he's 78 years old. So that means he's in year, we can say he's in the 79th year. So when we count in Sudarshan Chakra, each house gets 12 years. So the first house is up to 12 years old. The second house is up to 24. Third house up to 36, up to 48. Up to 60 is the fifth house, up to 72 is the sixth house. And finally, now that he's in between 72 and 84, we're at the seventh house. So this is Aquarius. And so we have to consider this sign and how is it from the Jyotirlinga Rashi. And the fourth from the moon is considered a very weak place from the moon. The moon falls into depression. So it's not auspicious. And it's also the 10th from the sun, which again, the sun prefers the fourth house where it has great victories. The 10th from the sun is weak. And so the sun is his ascendant lord and his Atmakarga. It's very important. So this is not a good period. And then if we break it down into the particular year, we break each of these 12-year dashas into individual years. The 73rd year is Aquarius, 74th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 78, and the 79th year from age 78 up to 79, which is now, is the Lagna with this Mars, which is not well situated from the dasha of Aquarius. So none of this looks very propitious for the outcomes of this critical event for him. Okay, let's look at Kamala Harris and her, count her Sudarshan Chakra. So again, from the ascendant, that's up to age 12, 24, up to 36, up to 48, up to 60. So she is now 59 years old and is in the 60th year. So counting that, this is the period of the Jyotirlinga Rashi. So just as for Simone Biles, where she came into her own when she came to the house of the Jyotirlinga Rashi, even in her first 12 years. For Kamala, it's coming a bit later, but this whole 12 years from 48 to 60 is this vortex coming in and taking over her chart and giving, boosting her to this world fame and prominence, because the Jyotirlinga Rashi is in full power right now. Now, if we look at the individual years, she's in the final year of the 12 years. So the first year would be the sign itself, the second year is the next, and so on. And the 12th year is the last one from the beginning. So this would be Libra, Virgo this year until her next birthday. And so let's see. So her birthday is on October 20th. So it's coming right up. So actually, so she'll turn 60 on October 20th, right? 64 to 2024, 60. Yeah. So then she will start, just days before the election, she will start her next Rashi. But this eventful year when she's been named the Democratic candidate had this power of the Jyotirlinga, and the final sign is Virgo, which is ruled by Mercury, which is we've seen as part of Maharaja Yoga, and the other ruler of Virgo, its Mula Trikona Lord, is Rahu for work. So that is also extremely fortunate. Now, how do we think Scorpio will be? Well, Scorpio is ruled by Ketu, which is exalted in an angle, very well placed. And the other ruler, Mars, is in Parivartana with the full moon. So again, this shows a huge shift in power and can show, attainment of her, her full status because of the lords. The power is the Ketu. This is opposite Jupiter, retrograde, which elsewhere I've explained, I see that as her Atma, her soul planet. So this is the soul planet energy is coming into this sign of Scorpio, and the rulers are very good too. So it all seems like a good outcome for the fans of Kamala Harris. And we'll see how it goes. We'll stay tuned. And thank you for watching, and any comments are welcome.